Humans shrug off injuries that kill other species reaches its dramatic peak when a catastrophic wave injures multiple alien competitors. As victims rapidly deteriorate, Dr. Elena Hart makes the bold decision to apply her controversial human-based treatments across species barriers. Despite resistance, she and Dr. Zaltek worked together frantically, saving 17 lives that traditional medicine couldn't, forever changing interplanetary medical ethics and revealing humanity's evolutionary resilience as a gift to be shared. The morning sun glinted off the azure waves of Northwave Resort as Dr. Elena Hart adjusted her medical scanner. From her position on the makeshift medical outpost overlooking the beach, she could see the preparations for the Interplanetary Surf Championship in full swing. Competitors from a dozen different worlds mingled on the white sand, their varied physiologies creating a riot of colors, shapes, and movements that still fascinated her, even after 5 years as an emergency surgeon on this popular tourist destination. "Another beautiful day for injuries," remarked Valix, her Zelian colleague, the translucent spines along his forearms glinting in the sunlight. The regenerative bone structures were a hallmark of his species, beautiful but deceptively fragile in certain conditions. Elena smiled. "Let's hope we don't see any today. First day of competition should be smooth." "You humans and your optimism." Valix clicked his mandibles in what Elena had learned was amusement. "The Vortans brought their experimental boards this year. Mark my words, we'll be busy." Elena watched a group of Vortans at the shoreline. Tall, willowy beings with iridescent skin that rippled with every sensation. Their hypersensitivity made them excellent navigators of complex wave patterns, but also vulnerable to even minor impacts. Her medical training from Zelena, a harsh planet where only genetically modified organisms could survive, had prepared her for treating diverse physiologies. But the Vortan's extreme sensory integration still presented challenges. The year 2285 marked the 10th Interplanetary Surf Championship, and Earth's status as a prime tourist destination for non-terrestrial species had transformed coastal economies worldwide. Northwave Resort, once a quiet beach town in what used to be called New Zealand, now hosted visitors from across the galaxy, all eager to experience Earth's unique combination of gravity, atmospheric composition, and most importantly, its legendary ocean waves. "Diagnostic equipment calibrated for Zelian physiology?" Elena asked, running through her mental checklist. "Affirmative," Valix responded. "Though I still maintain that your human protocols are excessively aggressive. The regenerative stimulators you insisted on installing would overwhelm most Zelian patients." "Different approaches for different biologies," Elena replied diplomatically. This was an old argument between them, one that highlighted the fundamental differences in their medical philosophies, where Zelian medicine focused on precise, minimal interventions. Human emergency medicine often involved more dramatic measures to stabilize patients quickly. "The opening ceremony begins in 30 minutes, announced the medical center's AI. "Projected attendance, 8,000 beings from 73 distinct species classifications." Elena nodded and continued her preparations. Despite her confident demeanor, she felt the familiar twinge of anxiety that accompanied these events. Each species had unique vulnerabilities. What might be a minor injury for one could be fatal for another. This complex interplay of different evolutionary paths made her job both fascinating and terrifying. As she organized the last of her supplies, she couldn't know that today would challenge everything she understood about interspecies medicine and reveal truths about her own species that she had never considered. The opening ceremony was spectacular. Holographic displays highlighted the history of surfing across multiple worlds, while competitors demonstrated preliminary maneuvers to appreciative crowds. Elena watched from her medical station, admiring the skill on display while keeping a professional eye out for potential problems. The Zelians were particularly impressive. their bodies seeming to meld with their specialized boards as they performed complex aerial maneuvers. Their bone spines extended and retracted with precise control, helping them maintain perfect balance even in the most challenging positions. "They're pushing the limits this year," muttered Valix beside her. "Tazren in particular. His maneuvers are exceeding safe tolerances for pelvic load-bearing." Elena followed his gaze to a young Xelian performing a particularly ambitious aerial spin. She had to admit it looked risky, even to her less specialized eye. "Should we say something?" she asked. Valix shook his head. "It would not be received well. Competition honor is significant in our culture." The words had barely left his mouth when a collective gasp rose from the crowd. Tazren had attempted an even more complex maneuver, but something had gone wrong. His board separated from his feet at the height of a spin, and his landing was catastrophic, body slamming into the water at an awkward angle before being tumbled by a following wave. Elena was moving before conscious thought, her emergency team already deploying the hover stretcher as they raced toward the shoreline. The Xelian medical team converged from the opposite direction, led by Dr. Zaltek, the chief Xelian physician. When they reached Tazren, the young surfer was lying motionless on the sand where rescuers had pulled him from the surf. His normally vibrant blue skin had turned a sickly gray, and several of his bone spines had shattered, their fragments protruding through his skin. "Pelvic fracture," Zaltek pronounced grimly after a quick scan. "Complete separation of the ilial joint. He will not survive transport to the main facility." Elena scanned the injury herself, comparing it to her knowledge of human anatomy. "This type of fracture wouldn't be fatal for a human," she said, thinking aloud. "Painful and serious, yes, but not immediately life-threatening." Zaltek's compound eyes fixed on her. "For Xelians, the pelvic ring contains critical immune responses. Once breached, systemic collapse begins within minutes. Traditional protocols dictate comfort measures only at this stage." Elena felt a surge of protest. "But we've developed new regenerative techniques for human pelvic trauma that might be adaptable. Let me try." "Absolutely not," Zaltek cut her off. "Untested cross-species applications are prohibited by the Interplanetary Medical Ethics Committee." Around them, a crowd had gathered, including several other Xelian competitors who were making keening sounds of distress. Tazren's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly on Elena's scanner. "He'll die if we do nothing," Elena insisted. Zaltek's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress. "It is regrettable, but applying human medical protocols to Xelian physiology could cause greater suffering before death." Elena made a split-second decision. "I'll take full responsibility. We can use a modified version of our regenerative protocol, lower intensity, focused specifically on containing the immune cascade rather than the fracture itself." For a moment, she thought Zaltek would physically block her, but something in her expression must have reached him. He stepped back slightly. "Proceed, but be aware that you may face serious consequences regardless of the outcome." Elena didn't waste time responding. She called for her specialized equipment while beginning emergency stabilization procedures. The Xelian's vital signs continued to plummet as she worked, his skin growing paler by the second. "Initiating modified regenerative field," she announced, adjusting the parameters on her device to account for what she knew of Xelian physiology. The machine hummed to life, projecting a soft blue glow over Tazren's shattered pelvis. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to change. The crowd around them had grown silent, and Elena could feel the weight of Zaltek's disapproval radiating beside her. Then, almost imperceptibly, the readings on her scanner began to stabilize. "Immune cascade halting," she reported, barely daring to hope. "Vital functions stabilizing." Zaltek leaned forward, his own scanner confirming her readings. "Impossible," he whispered. The damage was too extensive. "Not impossible," Elena replied, continuing to monitor and adjust. Just different. Human emergency medicine specializes in preventing death from injuries that would be fatal in their natural course. Our bodies evolved to survive severe trauma. It's something we take for granted. As Tazren was carefully transferred to a stretcher for transport to the medical center, Elena caught Zaltek's gaze. I understand there may be consequences for my actions today, but I couldn't stand by and watch him die. You have broken protocol, Zaltek acknowledged, his tone unreadable. But you have also achieved something our medical science considered impossible. This requires further investigation. Back at the medical center, Elena worked alongside the Zelian medical team to continue Tazren's treatment. The initial crisis had passed, but the young surfer's recovery was far from assured. Elena's improvised treatment had halted the immediate immune cascade that would have killed him. But the complex work of helping his body heal the shattered pelvic ring remained. Our approach would be to surgically stabilize the fragments, then use targeted regenerative therapy to accelerate natural healing, Elena explained to the gathered Zelian physicians. But I understand your concerns about applying human protocols directly. Your intervention defied all Zelian medical wisdom, Zaltek stated flatly. The senior physician had been observing her work with an intensity that made Elena uncomfortable. By all established knowledge, Tazren should have died within minutes of his injury. Different evolutionary paths, different medical approaches, Elena replied. Humans evolved on a high-gravity planet with large predators and frequent physical trauma. Our bodies developed robust emergency responses to injuries. Yet you apply these approaches across species boundaries without proper research, Zaltek countered. This is dangerously presumptuous. Elena felt her patience wearing thin. With respect, Dr. Zaltek, I modified the protocols significantly based on Zelian physiology, and the alternative was certain death. Before Zaltek could respond, the door slid open to admit Tarun, an Aurelian bioengineer who worked with the medical team. Aurelians were known for their remarkable ability to regenerate internal organs, a trait that had made them valuable collaborators in developing new medical technologies. I heard about what happened, Tarun said, his luminescent eyes taking in the scene. The resort is buzzing with rumors that human medical techniques saved a Zelian from an unsurvivable injury. Rumors that are dangerously premature. Zaltek clicked sharply. The patient remains in critical condition, but alive, Tarun noted, which contradicts established Zelian medical expectations. He turned to Elena. I'd like to analyze the treatment protocols you used. There may be important insights into cross-species applications. That would be welcome, Elena replied, grateful for the support. I've been wondering if there's something unique about human tissue response that could be beneficial to other species in emergency situations. Zaltek's spines flattened against his arms, a sign of irritation. This goes beyond medical curiosity. Dr. Hart, if humans possess biological advantages that other species do not, it raises serious questions about competitive fairness in interplanetary events. Elena blinked in surprise. Fairness? We're talking about emergency medical treatment, not competition. Are we? Zaltek challenged. If human competitors can shrug off injuries that would kill or permanently disable others, is that not an inherent advantage? One that cannot be overcome through training or technology? The question hung in the air, unexpected and uncomfortable. Elena had never considered human resilience as a form of privilege before. It was simply how their bodies worked. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, Tarun interjected diplomatically. First, let's understand exactly what happened here from a biological perspective. Then, we can address any broader implications. Over the next several days, Elena split her time between treating Tazrin and working with Tarun to analyze the biological mechanisms behind the successful intervention. The young Zalian was recovering slowly but steadily, defying all previous medical expectations for his species. Meanwhile, word of the incident had spread throughout the resort. Elena found herself the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations wherever she went. Some seemed to regard her with newfound respect, while others, particularly certain Zelian officials, watched her with evident suspicion. The situation came to a head during a routine meeting with the Championship Organizing Committee. What Elena had expected to be a simple medical briefing turned into something far more confrontational when Redden, the head of the committee, raised unexpected concerns. "Dr. Hart," he began formally, "the committee has received a formal inquiry from the Zelian Medical Consortium regarding your unauthorized treatment of competitor Tazrin." Elena straightened in her chair. "I made an emergency medical decision to save a life. The patient is recovering well." "That is precisely the issue," Redden replied. "Your intervention has raised questions about potential biological disparities between competing species. Some delegates are suggesting that humans possess unfair physiological advantages that should be accounted for in competition categories." "You can't be serious," Elena protested. "Medical treatment has nothing to do with sporting categories." "Doesn't it?" challenged a Zelian committee member. "If human competitors can sustain and recover from injuries that would permanently disable or kill others, how is that fair competition?" Elena looked around the table, realizing with dismay that several committee members seemed to share this view. "Are you suggesting we should handicap human competitors because our bodies heal efficiently?" "We are suggesting," Redden said carefully, "that perhaps competition categories should take biological resilience into account, just as they do for other physical attributes." "This is absurd." Elena stood up, unable to contain her frustration. "Next, you'll be penalizing Aurelians for their organ regeneration, or Vortans for their sensory perception. Those attributes are relevant to performance." The Zelian committee member clicked back. "Your human resilience means you can take risks that would be fatal for others. It is a competitive advantage hidden within your biology." The meeting deteriorated from there, with various committee members taking sides in an increasingly heated debate. By the time Elena left, she felt drained and bewildered. What had begun as an emergency medical intervention had somehow morphed into a controversy about fairness, advantage, and the very nature of interspecies competition. Back at the medical center, she found Tarun waiting with preliminary results from their analysis. "I think I've identified something interesting," he said, gesturing to his displays. "Humans evolved in an environment with frequent traumatic injuries, falls, animal attacks, combat. Your bodies developed multiple redundant systems for survival." Elena nodded absently, still distracted by the committee meeting. "It's basic human physiology, nothing special." "But it is special," Tarun insisted. "Look at this comparison. When a Zelian suffers pelvic fracture, their immune system immediately abandons the area to prevent resource waste on doomed tissue. But human bodies do the opposite, flooding the injury site with resources, fighting to preserve every cell. Different evolutionary strategies," Elena said, focusing now on the data. "Zelians evolved to sacrifice damaged body parts to preserve the whole. Humans evolved to fight for every inch of tissue." "Exactly." Tarun's eyes glowed brighter with excitement. "And when you applied your regenerative therapy, you essentially tricked the Zelian body into adopting a human-like response pattern. You forced it to fight for the damaged tissue rather than abandoning it." Elena studied the comparative scans with growing interest. "So the therapy didn't just stabilize the fracture, it fundamentally altered the immune response pattern, which raises fascinating possibilities for emergency medicine across species," Tarun concluded, "but also explains why some are uncomfortable with the implications. You've demonstrated that human biological responses can be artificially imposed on other species, with dramatic results. I was just trying to save a life, Elena murmured. And you did, came a voice from the doorway. They turned to see Zaltek entering the lab. His usual rigid posture somehow softened. Tazrin's condition continues to improve. He will survive, something our medical science deemed impossible. Elena nodded cautiously, unsure of Zaltek's current position. I'm glad to hear it. However, the Zelian physician continued, your actions have created significant disruption within both medical and sporting communities. There is talk of formal protests against human competitors. Because our bodies heal efficiently? Elena couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. Because humans possess biological attributes that allow you to survive what kills others, Zaltek corrected. It is not simply about healing. It is about the fundamental calculus of risk. A human can attempt maneuvers knowing that failure means pain and recovery. For a Zelian, the same failure means death. Elena felt a chill as she considered this perspective. I never thought of it that way. Few humans do, Zaltek replied, his tone surprisingly gentle. Your species takes for granted what others would consider miraculous, the ability to survive catastrophic injury. Before Elena could respond, alarms blared throughout the medical center. The AI's voice cut through the noise. Multiple casualties at main competition beach. All medical personnel report immediately. The scene at the beach was chaos. A rogue wave, later determined to be caused by an underwater seismic event, had struck during the Vortan preliminary round. Several competitors had been caught in the massive surge, their boards shattered and bodies tossed violently against rocks at the north end of the beach. Elena worked frantically alongside the other medical teams, triaging the injured as they were brought in. The Vortans had suffered the worst injuries, their hypersensitive nervous systems overwhelmed by the trauma. Even minor impacts caused neurological cascades that could prove fatal without immediate intervention. Systemic neural collapse in progress, she diagnosed as she scanned the first Vortan brought to her station. Their iridescent skin had dulled to a flat gray, and tremors racked their slender frame. Beginning neural stabilization. Nearby, she could hear Zaltek directing his team with similar urgency. The Zelian medical staff worked with practiced efficiency, but Elena could see the grim set of their mandibles. For many of the injured, traditional treatments would be insufficient. As she finished stabilizing her patient and moved to the next, Elena made a split-second decision. Tarun, she called across the medical area. Bring the modified regenerative field generators, all of them. The Aurelian looked up sharply. Are you certain? The protocols aren't fully tested for Vortan physiology. They're dying, Elena replied simply. We need to try. To her surprise, Zaltek backed her decision. Implement Dr. Hart's protocols on critical patients, he ordered his team. Standard approaches are proving inadequate. For the next several hours, the combined medical teams worked relentlessly, adapting Elena's human-based emergency protocols for Vortan and Zelian patients. Not all survived. The injuries were too severe in some cases, but many who would have died under traditional treatments began to stabilize. As the immediate crisis passed and patients were transferred to the main medical facility, Elena found herself sitting exhausted on the beach, watching the now calm ocean. Zaltek settled beside her, his exoskeleton creaking slightly. Your methods saved 17 lives today that our traditional medicine could not have preserved, he said without preamble. I was wrong to resist your approach. Elena turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. You were right to be cautious. Cross-species medical applications can be dangerous without proper research. Perhaps, Zaltek's compound eyes reflected the setting sun. But caution must be balanced with innovation. Your human perspective, that death can be defied, That the body can be forced to survive beyond its natural limits is alien to Zelian thinking. Yet today, it proved invaluable. "It's not about defying death," Elena said thoughtfully. "It's about understanding that different species have different thresholds. What's fatal for one may be survivable for another, if we can bridge the gap with the right technology." "An interesting perspective," Zaltek clicked softly, "but one that will continue to raise difficult questions about interspecies interactions." As if summoned by his words, a delegation approached them along the beach, Redden at the lead, accompanied by several committee members and what appeared to be government officials. "Dr. Hart, Dr. Zaltek," Redden addressed them formally. "The Interplanetary Regulatory Commission has convened an emergency session regarding today's events. Your presence is requested immediately." The Interplanetary Regulatory Commission had commandeered the resort's main conference center. Representatives from all competing species were present, along with medical authorities, sporting officials, and various governmental delegates. The atmosphere was tense as Elena and Zaltek were ushered to seats at the front of the room. Commissioner Javel, a stern-looking human with cybernetic enhancements, opened the proceedings. "Today's tragic events have brought to light significant questions regarding interspecies medical protocols and the inherent biological disparities between competing species. Dr. Hart, you implemented experimental cross-species treatments without proper authorization. Please explain your actions." Elena stood, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. The patients were dying. Traditional species-specific protocols were proving inadequate in many cases. I adapted human emergency medicine techniques that have proven effective in treating catastrophic trauma. "Without proper testing or approval," noted a Zelian commissioner. "There was no time for approval processes," Elena replied firmly. "And the results speak for themselves. Many competitors who would have died are now recovering." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Commissioner Javel raised a hand for silence. "Dr. Zaltek, as the senior Zelian medical authority present, what is your assessment of Dr. Hart's actions?" Zaltek rose, his exoskeleton gleaming under the conference room lights. "Initially, I opposed Dr. Hart's methods as reckless and presumptuous. I believed, as many Zelians do, that certain injuries are simply fatal, that attempting to prevent the inevitable merely prolongs suffering." He paused, mandibles working thoughtfully. "I was wrong. The human approach to catastrophic injury, to fight beyond what seems possible, has merit that our medical science failed to recognize. Today, I witnessed competitors of multiple species survive injuries that our medical texts declare unsurvivable." "This raises profound questions," interjected a Vortan delegate, their skin shifting colors with emotion. "If humans possess biological resilience that allows them to survive what kills others, does this not create fundamental inequity in interspecies competition? Should humans be competing in separate categories?" Angry voices rose from the human delegation, met by equally heated clicks and whistles from others. The chamber descended into chaos until Commissioner Javel amplified his voice above the din. "Enough! This is precisely why we have convened, to address these questions rationally." When order had been restored, Elena asked to speak again. "I understand the concerns about competitive fairness, but I think we're missing something important here. Yes, humans can survive injuries that might kill members of other species, but that's a product of our evolutionary history, not some inherent superiority." She activated a holographic display showing comparative physiological data. Humans evolved in an environment filled with predators, wars, and accidents. Our bodies developed multiple redundant systems for surviving trauma, because those who survived passed on their genes. It wasn't a gift, it was a brutal evolutionary necessity. She advanced the display to show the modified treatment protocols. "What's important is that we can now share this resilience through medical technology. The treatments we implemented today don't make Zelians or Vortans into humans. They simply bridge the gap between different evolutionary paths. An interesting perspective, acknowledged Commissioner Javel. But it doesn't address the competitive disparity. If humans can take risks that would kill other competitors, how is that fair competition? Perhaps we've been categorizing competition incorrectly, suggested Tarun, who had joined them at the front. Instead of dividing by species, we could categorize by biological resilience profiles, allowing competitors with similar risk thresholds to compete against each other regardless of species. This proposal sparked intense discussion throughout the chamber. Some delegates appeared intrigued, others offended, and many simply confused by the radical suggestion. As the debate continued, Elena noticed Redden conferring urgently with several officials. Finally, he approached the main podium and requested permission to speak. Commissioners, delegates, I believe there is another aspect we must consider, he said gravely. The medical data Dr. Hart and Dr. Zaltek have gathered today represents a significant breakthrough in interspecies emergency medicine. There are ethical implications beyond sporting competition. He gestured toward the holographic displays. If these protocols can save lives across species boundaries, do we not have a moral obligation to develop and share them? Are we prepared to prioritize competitive classifications over life-saving medical advances? The question hung in the air, shifting the tone of the discussion. Elena caught Zaltek's gaze across the chamber. The Zelian physician gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. Commissioner Javel finally spoke into the thoughtful silence. It seems we face complex questions that cannot be resolved in a single session. I propose the following interim measures. First, the establishment of an interspecies bioethics committee to evaluate the medical protocols developed by Drs. Hart and Zaltek. Second, a temporary suspension of competitive classifications while we develop more equitable categories based on physiological risk profiles rather than species designations. He looked around the chamber. Are there objections? Despite some grumbling, the proposal was accepted with relative consensus. As the formal session concluded and delegates began to disperse, Elena found herself surrounded by a mixed group of medical professionals from various species, all eager to learn more about the emergency protocol she had implemented. This is only the beginning, Tarun said quietly beside her. You've opened a door that cannot be closed again. For better or worse, Elena replied, watching as Zaltek approached through the crowd. For better, the Zelian physician stated firmly as he joined them. I must formally apologize. Dr. Hart, my initial resistance to your methods was based on cultural bias rather than scientific evaluation. Today has demonstrated that interspecies medical cooperation has potential we have barely begun to explore. Elena nodded her acceptance of the apology. We all have our biases. The important thing is recognizing when they're limiting our perspective. Indeed, Zaltek agreed. And now, I believe we have patients to attend to, and much research to document. In the days that followed, Elena and Zaltek worked together to formalize the emergency treatment protocols that had saved so many lives. Tarun joined their efforts, bringing Aurelian biotechnology insights that further enhanced their approach. The Provisional Interspecies Bioethics Committee observed their work closely, sometimes interfering with bureaucratic requirements, but generally supporting the research. The injured competitors continued to recover, many defying all previous medical expectations for their species. Tazrin, the young Zelian, whose injury had started everything, became something of a celebrity among the medical community, the first documented case of a Zelian surviving complete pelvic ring disruption. 1 month after the Rogue Wave incident, the Interplanetary Surf Championship resumed with a modified competition structure. Rather than being divided strictly by species, competitors were now classified according to physiological resilience profiles, a complex measure that accounted for various biological factors, including trauma response, recovery capacity, and systemic redundancy. Elena watched from the medical station as the first mixed-species heat began. Competitors from 4 different worlds, including both humans and Xelians, took to the waves together, all sharing similar risk profiles despite their diverse biologies. "A remarkable change," observed Zaltek, who had joined her for the occasion. "Not without controversy, but a step toward more meaningful competition. And, more importantly," Elena added, "every competitor out there now has access to emergency protocols tailored to their specific biology. If accidents happen, we're better prepared than ever before." Zaltek's mandibles clicked in agreement. "Your human perspective has changed Xelian medicine fundamentally. Dr. Hart, our physicians are now exploring trauma responses we previously considered impossible. Already, there are cases of successful interventions that would have been deemed futile just months ago." "It works both ways," Elena pointed out. "Your precision approaches have improved our understanding of targeted immune responses. Human emergency medicine will benefit enormously." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commissioner Javel, accompanied by several dignitaries Elena didn't recognize. "Dr. Hart, Dr. Zaltek." The commissioner greeted them formally. "Allow me to introduce Ambassador Katal of the Galactic Medical Consortium. She has been following your work with great interest." The ambassador, a tall being with crystalline features that caught the sunlight in dazzling patterns, inclined her head in greeting. "Your collaborative research has attracted attention far beyond sporting medicine," she said, her voice melodic and precise. "The consortium believes your approach to asymmetric biological resilience has applications throughout interspecies medicine." "We're honored by your interest," Elena replied cautiously, "though our work is still in early stages." "Precisely why I am here," the ambassador continued. "The consortium wishes to establish a dedicated research institute focused on interspecies emergency medicine, with you two as founding directors. We believe your complementary perspectives, human resilience and Xelian precision, represent an ideal foundation for this emerging field." Elena exchanged a startled glance with Zaltek. "That's an unexpected offer." "But a timely one," Zaltek noted. "Our provisional protocols have already saved dozens of lives that traditional species-specific medicine would have lost. With proper resources and support, we could systematize these approaches across many more species. The potential impact is precisely why the consortium is interested," Ambassador Katal confirmed. "For too long, interspecies medicine has focused on accommodating differences rather than leveraging them. Your work suggests a new paradigm, one where the unique evolutionary advantages of each species can be adapted to benefit others." The conversation continued, delving into details of the proposed institute, its location, funding, research priorities, and governance structure. By the time the ambassador departed, Elena felt overwhelmed by the possibilities opening before them. "Did that really just happen?" she asked Tarun, who had joined them midway through the discussion. The Aurelian's eyes glowed with excitement. "It did, and it's only logical. What began as an emergency improvisation has implications for every mixed-species environment in known space. You should accept their offer." "We should accept their offer," Elena corrected, looking to Zaltek. "This was never just my work." The Xelian physician's spines rippled in what Elena now recognized as a gesture of deep satisfaction. "I believe we have much to learn from each other still, Dr. Hart, and many lives to save through our collaboration." 1 year later, the newly established Institute for Interspecies Trauma Medicine occupied a purpose-built facility overlooking the same beach where everything had begun. Researchers and physicians from 24 worlds worked together, developing and refining protocols that bridge the gaps between different evolutionary paths. Elena stood on the observation deck, watching as the second Interplanetary Surf Championship under the new classification system proceeded below. Competitors were now grouped into 6 distinct resilience categories, each with its own safety protocols and emergency response teams trained in the Institute's methods. "Quite a different scene from last year," remarked Tarun, joining her at the railing. The Aurelian had become the Institute's lead bioengineering researcher, his insights into regenerative biology proving invaluable. "For the better," Elena replied. "Not a single fatality in any competition since the new protocols were implemented. And applications far beyond sporting events," added Zaltek, approaching from the lab area. "The mining consortium on Vega 4 reports a 60% reduction in cross-species industrial fatalities since adopting our emergency response systems." Elena nodded, feeling a complex mix of pride and humility. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a single life had expanded into something that was changing interspecies medicine throughout known space. "We still have so much to learn," she said, watching as a mixed group of competitors, human, Zelian, Vortan, and others she couldn't immediately identify, rode a massive wave together. Each species has its unique strengths and vulnerabilities. The key was stepping back from our assumptions about what's normal or natural. "A lesson that extends beyond medicine," Zaltek observed philosophically. "The universe does not operate according to any single species perspective. Truth emerges from the intersection of diverse viewpoints." "Speaking of diverse viewpoints," Tarun interjected, "Tazrin has requested permission to join next month's research symposium. He wants to present his perspective as the first Zelian to survive catastrophic pelvic trauma." "Approved," Elena and Zaltek said simultaneously, then exchanged amused glances. Below them, the competition continued. Species that once would have been segregated by physical differences, now unified by a deeper understanding of their shared biology. Different evolutionary paths, different thresholds of resilience, but a common commitment to pushing boundaries while preserving life. Elena thought back to that first desperate intervention, when she had applied human emergency protocols to a dying Zelian against all established wisdom. She couldn't have imagined then where that moment would lead, to new medical paradigms, new competitive frameworks, and new understanding between species. "The next research cohort arrives tomorrow," Zaltek noted, consulting his data tablet. "Physicians from 17 worlds, all eager to learn interspecies emergency medicine." "What should we teach them first?" Tarun wondered. Elena smiled, watching the surfers below, each moving according to their own biology, yet all riding the same wave. "That resilience takes different forms across species, but the will to survive unites us all, and that sometimes what one species takes for granted might be exactly what another needs to survive." As the sun began to set over Northwave Resort, casting golden light across the gathered beings from countless worlds, Elena felt a profound sense of purpose. Human resilience, the ability to shrug off injuries that would kill other species, had proved not to be a competitive advantage to be guarded, but a gift to be shared. Through technology, understanding, and cooperation, the boundaries between different evolutionary paths were beginning to blur, not erasing the beautiful diversity of life throughout the galaxy, but creating bridges where once there had been only chasms. The Institute's motto, inscribed at its entrance in the languages of 24 worlds, captured this vision perfectly. Different paths, common journey. Different bodies, shared resilience. And as Elena watched the mixed species teams below, celebrating their successful rides, she knew that journey had only just begun.